Welcome to another procedural material tutorial. Today we're making this sandy soil you see on your screen right now. This is what it's looking like in the viewport, unlike 1,000 samples. We're sort of zoomed out so you can't see all the super fine detail far away, but up close you can see that we have some nice colors and bump going on here. And I just wanted to show you the final product before we get started. So without further ado, let's get into it. So to get started for this one, I just have my icosphere in the center. I subdivided it 5 times and shaded it smooth. Then I just pointed my camera right at it. Then if you head over to the shading workspace, I just have a 3D viewport set up on the side and then my node editor. Then for the lighting, I'm just going to go to rendered preview. I'm using cycles, but this material works just fine in both EV and cycles. You don't need one or the other. Then if we hit this drop down here, for the lights, I'm using scene world, so I uncheck this, and then using the built-in forced HDRI that gives us 3D lighting automatically. So then to get started, I'll press new. Then make sure you have the Node Wrangler add-on checked in your preferences. So edit preferences, add-ons, and search up the Node Wrangler add-on. Check the box here because this will give you some shortcuts. Then we're going to press Shift A, search for a noise texture. Then with this selected, I'll press Control and T and move our object into the vector here. What we're going to be doing with this guy is simply modifying the vector of the object input. And so to do that, we'll hit Shift A and we're going to search for a mix RGB. Then we're going to take the color from this noise texture into color 1, and then the vector from here into color 2. So if we preview this with Control Shift and left click, if we move it all the way up to a 1, we have the object vector, and if we move it to a 0, we just have the noise texture color. So we're going to put this at a 0.99, which is sort of going to warp the coordinates a little bit, and on our Voronoi texture. So we'll hit Shift A and add that Voronoi texture so you can see the difference. So first I'll just plug in the mapping into the vector. If we Control Shift and left click twice to preview the color, we can see that it looks like this. But if we switch to this mix RGB here, we can see that it sort of rounds some of the shapes out a little bit. And obviously the lower we put this, the more rounded the shapes get, and we get different effects going on here. I'm going to leave it at a 0.99 though, just to keep them slightly round. Then with this Voronoi, I'm going to change the scale all the way up to a 400 to make these really tiny sand grains. And this is going to be our first level of detail with this Voronoi texture. I'm just going to grab this guy and move him over here, and then grab him down here. Then I'm going to press Shift A right here and search for a math node, because we're going to create a mask out of this. We're going to take this color into the value of the math node. Then we're going to change the function to greater than. And so we'll change the threshold to, for now we'll leave it right here. So what this is saying is every value greater than 0.5 is turning into white. And so currently we want this one to be a 1 because we're going to have 3 levels of detail. And so the next one will be a 0.5 and the top one will be a 0.333. So it divides everything up into thirds. So then we'll hit Shift A and search for a mix RGB here. Then we're going to take this greater than value into our factor. Then we're going to take the color from the Voronoi into color 1. And then the color 2, we're going to make a pure black. Now if we Control Shift and left click, it looks the exact same as the Voronoi texture, which is all right because we're going to be having 3 of these. So then we're going to select all these 3 guys, and I'm going to press Control J, and that's going to put them all right here. So I'm going to hit Shift and hold right click right here, which will give us this guy so that we can move it around a little bit. So then I'll select these guys, press Control Shift D, that'll make a duplicate, and I'll put it right above. Then if I press Shift R, it'll duplicate the action I just did. So then on this top Voronoi texture, I'm going to switch the scale to a 300, or the middle one actually. And then we'll take this previous mix node into this color 2. So what that's doing is it's combining them. And to give you better perspective, I'll switch this one to a 5, and then I'll switch this one to a 10, like this. And we can sort of see that it's mixing them. I'm going to up this to like a 15. And we need to switch this greater than to a 0.5. So now we can see that it's mixing them properly. But yeah, anyways, I'm going to switch this middle one back to a 300 and the bottom back to a 400. So nice. We have the mixing going on. Then this top guy, the scale, I'm going to switch to a 200. The threshold to a 0.333, or you can just type in 1/3, 1 divided by 3, which will give us a third. Then I'm going to take the previous mix node into here. Now we can Control Shift and left click this guy. And we have our last level of detail for the sand. Sweet. So now we're going to be factoring this into some bump. And to do that, we're going to switch these to color values, to black and white values. So I'm going to hit Shift A and I'm at a white noise, and this is also going to randomize them. So currently, if I hit Shift A, I'm going to search for just a math node here. I'm going to change these values to 0. This is just an example. You don't actually have to do this. So if we preview this right now, we can see that we have this black and white going on. And then if we plug this into the white noise and preview this one, this gives them a completely different random value, just to add some randomness to everything. So then I'll go ahead and hit X on this guy. And then with this white noise texture, I'm going to plug it into a bump node. So I'll hit Shift A, search for a bump node, just like this. Then take this value into our height, and then this normal into the normal of our principled shader. So if we preview him, we can see that we have some super fine sand. I'm obviously zoomed in really far, so you can see it. If you zoom out far enough, then it sort of looks pretty flat. But yeah. Anyways, now that we have this, we're going to be factoring in some color now. And to do that, I'm going to hit Shift A. I'm going to search for another white noise texture. And the reason I'm doing this is so that we don't have every sand grain that's higher be the same color, so that the colors are obviously more random and they're not as predictable as the height, so that it's not they don't correlate evenly. Anyways, so that's going to give us completely different black and white values than this one did. So then I'll hit Shift A. I'm going to search for a mix RGB node up here, and this is going to play into the factor for that. So I'm going to hit Shift A, search for a math node, and then switch the function to greater than. Plug this value into the value and leave the threshold at a 0.5. Then we're going to take the value and plug it into the factor. So currently, this is just playing into the mask, and we haven't actually added our colors yet. So we need to do that. And to start, we're going to be using a noise texture. So I'll hit Shift A. I'm going to search for a noise texture just like this. And then plug this mapping into our vector here. We're not plugging in the mixed one, by the way. We're plugging in just the normal vector mapping. So then on this noise texture, I'm going to switch the scale all the way up to a 50. And then the detail to a 10. Just like that. Then I'll press Shift A. Search for a map range node. Plug this factor into the value. And I'll Control Shift left click to preview. And we're just going to up the contrast between these. So I'm going to move the from minimum to a 0.3 and the from maximum down to a 0.7, just so we get more contrast effects going on. Then I'm going to hit Shift A and I'm going to search for mix RGB. Then I'm going to plug this into the factor. Then Control Shift D like this. And so now we have 2. And these are going to play into our colors 1 and our color 2 here like that. So then for this color 1, I'll go ahead and give you a hex value. These are going to be the browner shades of sand. So that's going to be a 766 A52. Again, that is a 766 A52. Just like that. So then this color 2 is going to be an BC9663. Again, that is a BC9663. Just like that. Obviously, you can pick whatever colors you want, but we're going to be adding some hue saturation nodes so you can switch the color of the sand anyways. But yeah, I'm just leaving these colors so you have the exact ones I'm using. Now, if we Control Shift left click to preview this, we can see that we have this sand color. So then I'll preview this next guy with Control Shift and left click. And this first one is going to be a B9A39B. Again, that is a B9A39B. Just like that. Then this color 2 is going to be a 755D54. Again, that is a 755D54. Just like that. So boom, now we have our colors. And if we Control Shift left click this mix node that we plugged them into, we can see that it's blending them all like this. And it's starting to look pretty good. So next, I'm just going to hit Shift A and search for a hue saturation node and throw both of those in between like this. So I can hit Shift D and move them down here. So we can adjust each of these individual sands however we like. And for me personally, I think I want to saturate this bottom one a little bit more. So I'm going to up this a couple times here, just so that it saturates a little more because it felt a little desaturated. Okay, cool. Then I'll hit Shift A, add another hue saturation afterwards so we can change the hue of everything as a whole. So I'll go ahead and Control Shift left click this guy. If I change this hue to a 0, we get blue sand. 0.25, we get pink sand. 0.75, we should get like a green. Yeah, we do get a green. Yeah, but default is 0.5, so we can lower the value as a whole and up the value as a whole. Same with the saturation. If you feel like it's too saturated towards the reds, you can always lower the saturation on here, or you can lower the saturation on the individual ones here like this, so that you get something more of like a grayish sand. But yeah, those are just some cool things you can do with the HSV nodes. So then with this hue saturation, we're just going to plug this value into our color like this. Voila. Now we can Control Shift and left click this guy. We can see that it's looking really, really good. And if you, something about the color though, if you want to change that, is if you think it's too spotty, you think it's too obvious where the color is going to be, you can always up this scale and this noise texture to like a 100, and that'll make everything a lot finer. But yeah, that's just something you can play around with in your own time. I think 100 looks better than a 50, so I'm going to leave it on there. That's just something you can do. Anyways, then this roughness, I'm just going to move that up to a 0.9, just because sand is pretty rough. It's not really too reflective. It sort of like scatters everything because of all the sand grains and all that. There are some little, maybe some shiny spots here and there where like there'll be like a rock that sort of glints, but I mean, we can take that into effect if we want. But to do that, all we have to do is, actually it's really simple. I can use this noise texture probably for it. Yeah, we'll do that real quick before we get out of here. So I'm going to Control Shift Control Shift D on this map range node. I'll preview him, and I'm actually going to bring this from maximum down to like a 0.31. What is that looking like? Nice, so it's giving us these little black tiny spots that are sort of glinty, and we're going to be using that into our roughness here. So I'm going to hit Shift A, I'll search for a, let's say a mix RGB node like this. I'm going to plug this guy into the factor, and so that's going to do, I'll Control Shift left click this guy. We can pick our minimum value, so the parts we want to be glinty, I can just make them like a 0.05, like that, and then the parts we want to be normal, we can make that like a 0.95 or 0.9 like we had before. So now if we plug this color into our roughness, just like that, we Control Shift left click, we have these random shiny spots. If you think there's too many, then we can always lower this to like a 0.2 and this to like a 0.21. So then we preview them, obviously it gets a lot smaller. We actually can't really see much going on here, so I'm going to up this back, maybe switch this to like a 0.25 and do like a 0.255, something like that. Yeah, so now these get a lot smaller. Nice. So anyways, that's just I didn't plan on adding that. It's just a last minute thing I added. But yeah, you can see some little glinty spots like right up here. And so yeah, there's like little sand grains that happen to be pretty reflective. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what this looks like on a plane real quick before we get out of here. So I'll hit Shift A, search for mesh and plane. I'm just going to scale it on the X and then scale it on the Y a little bit. Nice. I'm going to hide my sphere real quick. Then with this selected, I'll Control A, apply the rotation and the scale. Go to my materials. I don't think I named this guy actually, so I'm just going to type in material. Yeah, I didn't name it. I'm going to go ahead and call him sandy soil. Just like that. I spelled it wrong. It's okay. I'll fix it in a minute. Then if I go to rendered preview, give it a second for the samples to get up there. It says rendering done. It doesn't give us a lot of detail when we're that far away. But when we get a little bit closer, we can see the sand grain much better. And if you think the sand grain's too small, it's really easy to change. So for instance, if you want to be able to see the detail better, like I do, you can just come in here to this mapping node and you can change the scale to like a 0.5 and that'll make it half the size. Obviously this is too big, but it's to exaggerate the effect, just so we can see it better. Then we go back to layout, and now we can see the sand is looking like this. So anyways, that is how you use the material, and hopefully you can find some use for this in your renders and stuff. And I will see you guys in the next one. Adios.